Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and we're here today for the Friday conversation. Have an awesome guest. Looking forward to speaking with Jennifer. Will you start us off with an introduction and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Jennifer Manocherian. I'm a lot of things.
Yeah.
I'm a family member. I have a large family. I've had a bunch of careers in my life, and I'm now in my waning years, shall we say. I don't like to think so, but I know I am. And unfortunately, that's what the chronology tells me. But I wrote a book, my first novel ever during COVID, and that's really what I would like to talk about. But all the other things I've done in my life obviously have led up to this moment. And COVID gave me the time to do it. I was a theater producer at the time. My office closed thanks to COVID and the Governor Cuomo, who shut down non-essential businesses, and theater just basically shut down. So I used the time that I had, and it was probably one of my more productive times ever. So thank you, COVID. Thank you, COVID. I no longer had to wear makeup or care what I looked like, and I had time to write, so it was all good. Didn't have to commute. I'm sorry, I don't make light of it, because a lot of people's lives were hell.
Yeah,
but it just happened.
Definitely time for people to pursue some creative endeavors that they may not have otherwise during the time.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I had COVID once, and it was not until last October. So, I mean, my husband's really afraid of it, so we avoided it. And I know there's terrible stories, so I'm kind of sorry that I, put it in such a light way. But it did, for myself, it just created a lot of space for me to do things I really wanted to do and never could fit in.
And our friend Paramita is also here. Paramita, thanks for making it.
Thank you so much.
Hi.
I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you.
So, I'm Paramita. I like to read a variety of genres. Literary fiction has been my main focus, and classics, and also fantasy and science fiction. And I'm just very excited to talk to Jennifer about her new book.
I'm sorry, Paramita, what did you say the first form of writing is that you choose?
Literary fiction.
Oh,
so,
perfect.
Or general fiction.
Perfect. Yeah. So we're aligned.
We are. And anyway, we'll get into it.
Okay.
Well, no, go ahead. Literary fiction.
Jennifer, the first thing that I wanted to ask you is, when I read the synopsis for your book, it comes at a very meaningful time for me, because I just finished reading a book by Ursula K. Le Guin, where she talks about, it's a nonfiction, and she says, that we talk about men and we talk about women, but old women are protagonists that we don't see a lot at all. Very rare, very difficult to execute well. And it's only lately that this trend has sort of started coming, also in older works coming to focus. So my main interest was this lady who is at the head of it all in your book, in the synopsis. And we are going to learn about her. And there are lots of things to she's seen a lot, she knows a lot, and there's a lot to learn. So that was immediately that piqued my interest. So what was the reason for this choice of perspective was my first question.
So the cover is what piqued your interest?
The synopsis more. The cover is lovely. The cover is wonderful. But I think the synopsis, where you have this matriarch, for want of a better word, who is this pivotal point in the story, is what I was like, I have to read this, which I am going to.
Thank you.
Soon.
Well, it makes me think of something funny what you said. Well, I didn't have it. Took me a very long time to find a title I was happy with. And at one time, my grandson was here, and I said something about old lady gives dinner. I don't know how I worded it. He said, "Oh my God, don't do that. Nobody will buy that book." People do. One reason why maybe it's unusual to see old people at the end of their lives as the main characters is because a lot of it's maybe it's a harder sell. I don't know, but this book is told while she, in a sense, is the main character. She's kind of the center of the wheel, shall we say? But the story is told from the point of there's 7 different points of view, and they're all. She has a daughter who's in her 70s. She has a granddaughter who's in her 30s. She has a night aide who's in her 20s. Well, I won't tell you all the characters, but it has a bunch of different ages of people whose all their points of view come in and their backgrounds. So while she's kind of the reference point, as is her dead husband. He kind of fits somehow into the lives. Everybody has had some connection to him as well. So, but it's not all about just this woman. It's the day in the life of all the people who are in her lives and who she invites to this party. So it all, as I said, she's like the center of it, but it's not only about her.
Mm-hmm.
And, some of these multiple points of view story, I don't know if you like them, but I think they can be really interesting. I mean, they take you all over the place. There's a lot of authors. There's a lot of authors who write beautifully with multiple points of view, like Barbara Kingsolver. Though I think somebody I don't know if you ever read A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles.
I love that book.
Oh,
I love that book.
Yes, I really loved it. I know that, Geraldine, Brooks, I think, is the author of a book called Horse, which was extremely successful recently, and that's multiple points of view. So, I think maybe some readers may resist that, but it's a way of storytelling that's different. I mean, there's no book that doesn't have other people in it. It's just you just hear the voices of all the different people from their point of view, not from somebody else's perspective.
Mm-hmm. When you write, how do you manage so many different points of view? Do you have certain rules that you follow when you're writing different points of view, or kind of guidelines that you have?
Well, this is all my life I've been a do-it-yourselfer, and writing a novel is no different. I mean, I've always been a reader.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've been reading. I resisted reading. I was like a rebellious in my family. I was like the non-intellectual. And I didn't take up reading till I was in my teens, and I haven't stopped since then. But I didn't have any rules because I knew I wanted to have these characters, and I wasn't quite sure how to do it. And I have a wonderful group of writers that I work with. When I say I work with, I mean, we all talk to each other and give each other feedback. And during Zoom, we would be on Zoom all day together and maybe never talking, but we were resources to one another. And, and also every summer we try to go away for a week together where we do nothing but write and talk about what we're doing. And so they also helped me to kind of figure out how to do this, but I don't know if it was because I had read something that made me think about it. It felt to me like the only way I could write this book. And having never written a novel before, I had started taking, just for the hell of it and to find out if I had the ability to do it, I started taking a writing class. I joined a writing group that met every other week for 2 hours. So it didn't exactly impede much on my life. But I did it in order to test whether I could write fiction because I wasn't sure if I could. I did a fair amount. I do screenwriting. I've done, I've written in many different forms, but I've never really thought that I could write even probably a short story. And I surprised myself. I felt like it's a form that I could do, but I never thought I could do a book. I mean, a book is minimally like 60,000 words. And just try writing and see how many words you can try. I mean, it's a lot. Page count is less important because it depends on the font size and the page size and all of that. But it was it was something that when I started, I almost thought it was just like Mission Impossible. I didn't think I'd ever be able to do that. And when I got up to like 20,000 words, I thought, oh my God, I have another at least 40,000 to go. I mean, it was just daunting. But as I started building these characters and enriching all the stories, I got to like 75,000 words. So I surprised myself. But it wasn't like I went in with any great design as to this is how I'm going to approach it, because I didn't have the experience. So it was really learning as you go, and listen to other people, and don't think that you know everything. To me, you need to have other people's perspective. You got to hear what their questions are, what's missing, what is it. In fact, my initial feedback I got was it reads like a play. And since dialogue is pretty easy for me, and I'm used to writing in the form of screenwriting, that was a real learning curve for me. I had to learn how to fill in the picture. I sometimes put it as I had to be the camera. I had to take you there. And that wasn't easy for me.
Yeah, that would be a big change to fill in the rest of the picture, not have the visual to help either back to the environment.
Yeah, it's every form of writing is a very different craft. I mean, even screenwriting and playwriting are very different too. Their demands are very different. And so, I mean, I know that. I mean, I've written the book of a couple of musicals. Actually, I've had a lot of fun with that too, because I love collaborating, and the composers I work with and the director, we just have a really good time doing it. And, but that's another, it's a different craft too. And it's one I also learned kind of on my feet. So you know what? I'm not afraid to fail. And that's kind of what enables me to do things. I've gone through life that way.
I think go to Parmeet, I'm sorry.
I was going to ask to follow up on something that both Steve and you said. Writing a novel, you mentioned you like collaborating a lot. Writing a novel can be quite isolating. Was that in terms, as in contrast to when you are working in a team for a play? Was there a change in mindset required as well?
That's a good question, Paramitha, because it is different. Because if I'm collaborating, when I was doing the book of a musical, you basically, a lot of people don't know what the book of a musical means. I mean, you don't have a musical without a book writer. I mean, the book writer creates you start with a play, let's say, and then you figure out what needs to be musicalized, and it goes from there. So you have to work with you have to collaborate. Now, people can have terrible collaborations, but it's something. And when you have a director comes in and you make changes, and you have to be the reason we've had a successful collaboration is that it's never about our egos. It's about trying to make the work, the best we're able to do. So the work is always the focus. Whereas in novel writing, you're right. It's isolating. And if I just worked in a study somewhere and just wrote and never talked to anybody about it, I wouldn't have that. I couldn't do it that way. I have to, it's really important for me to share what I'm doing with the people. I don't overburden anybody, but I think that the writers group that I have, I think maybe they read 2 drafts. I mean, it's a lot to ask somebody to read over 200 pages of a book, as a favor. I mean, but we do it for each other. So there's a reciprocity there. But you don't want to waste people's time. So you have to be at a certain point where you feel like, okay, I'm kind of I have to know what I have. Is this worth pursuing? Is it not worth pursuing? That's like the first draft. And I send it to other people, my sisters, other people who are readers, just to kind of get feedback. And then based on that, you go back to working, and based on all the notes and notes to me are people can give you feedback, and some of them you'll think, okay, thanks and goodbye. And but when it resonates with you, and when there's something that really clicks, that's the feedback that I find useful. And so then I took all of that, and then I did a second draft, or I don't know how many drafts I did, but when I felt like, okay, I think I've done as much as I can do, I asked them to read it again. And then I did some more work. I mean, this was a long process. And then I, based on the knowledge, because with everybody I know in this book group has been published last year. And I know enough about the process of how long it can take you to find an agent and all of that. And when you get an agent, generally speaking, they'll send the book to a developmental editor who will ask you to make a lot of changes. And then it's possible you can even get a publisher finally, and who will put you through that process another time. So before I even tried to do any of that, I sent it to the developmental editor. And she sent me really, really comprehensive feedback. And when I first saw it, I thought, oh, God, I just can't look at this anymore. And I mean, it was something, it just took me like 2 weeks to be able to go back over what she had sent me, and then to start, calm myself down, and to realize some of it is like you use this word beautiful in 2 sentences next to each other, easy stuff. And then some of it was like moving chapters around a little, which wasn't hard. But then there was a couple of major things she suggested. And she was so right, and I knew she was right. And so once I know something that I have to do, I work really fast. And so then I was able to get it done. And the only note she gave me I didn't agree with was the ending. And it's my book, it's my ending. In fact, it's funny, some people don't like it. Well, I mean, not a lot of people, but they get all these reviews. Well, I've stopped reading them, but I know every once in a while some people feel like there's a few people. I don't want to make it seem like nobody likes my ending. Most people like my ending, but it is what it is, and I'm happy with it. So that's kind of how I work with other people. And to be honest with you, since COVID, a lot of what I do is not in person. In fact, I'm so used to seeing people on Zoom that I don't even know who I've seen in person anymore. I mean, I'll say, oh my God, you mean I haven't seen you in 3 years? So, I mean, like the developmental editor, I never met her. I mean, a lot of it's not in person, but it still feels very personal. Because, we all know each other, and we see each other, we see our faces. I mean, I like that. I'm awfully tired of seeing my own face, but I never saw myself so much in my life, and I'm not very happy, but it's been great to see everybody. And so it hasn't made me feel isolated. I mean, Zoom is like a godsend, and FaceTime for people. And even before Zoom, if you have relatives who live somewhere else, Paramisha, I don't know where you live, but if you have relatives in India and you live here, how do you exist before FaceTime? I mean, it's so nice to be able to contact people. It's a gift.
Very true.
An electronic gift among all the electronic things that are not really gifts anymore, that are frightening.
Yeah.
True.
But
I wanted to ask you something which is related to your prior professional experience. So you have worked a lot in theatre, and pardon me if this is coming from a place of ignorance, but my understanding is in theatre or even on screen, a lot of work can be done by the audiovisual medium, so by the camera, by non-verbal cues. And in a book, when all you have are your words, and in some sense, this is the power of a writer. I mean, as a reader, primarily, I see this as a writer's power, but it can also be very, very challenging was that a change in mindset for you? You mentioned it a bit when you said that dialogue comes easy to you, but then you have to fill in all the gaps.
Well, it was
was that part of this shift?
Very hard. It was very hard for me. When I mean, more than anything I've done, I've written. In fact, I have a film that is in. We finished now, and we're trying to get into a festival, and a film that I had written. And with film, whatever you're writing, your directions are that for the camera or for whatever. A lot of things don't need to be said even. I mean, you can have somebody look at somebody with a look of hatred or a look of anger. You don't have to have the person say, I'm angry. I sometimes give an example of a film that I have used for teaching, which is called The Confirmation, and Clive Owen is in it. And it's an indie film, and it's something the only qualifier I will say about it is that it's that it doesn't really deal very heavily with his alcoholism, but it's the story of a man who needs to reconnect with his child. He's divorced, and he also needs to get his act together. And in that film, while the credits are running, now I haven't seen it in a while, so forgive me if I'm a little bit wrong in what I'm saying, but they establish character almost before you've seen anybody, because you hear a truck trying to start up and it doesn't start. So before you've even seen anybody, you have a sense of somebody's kind of having problems. Something isn't working. Mm-hmm. And then when it opens up, you see Clive Owen sitting in this old, he hasn't shaved. He's sitting in this kind of beat up truck, and he's in a little town somewhere. And again, not a word of dialogue. You have been able to create a character without a word of dialogue, just all basically based on what you're seeing. And then he drives, and again, forgive me if I'm not doing the synopsis right, but he goes to pick up his kid, and this is adorable kid he's such an actor, this little boy, and very, very cute, but he's picking him up in front of a church with his ex-wife. And it's Mario Bella. Is that her name? Mario Bella. She's mm-hmm. a wonderful actress, and I'm not saying her name right, but she's really good. And she says to him, listen, you screw up this time, you're not going to see him again. Or something, words to that effect. So we have a whole backstory in one sentence. I mean, the economy of it is amazing. Now, in a book, I don't know how many pages you would need to do all of that. But when you're talking about the hurdles, that's the hurdle. You have to find a way to give all that information that's not in exposition, that's in a way that's really organic, and create your characters in a very different way. And to me, the basis of any writing I do or any advice I give to the whatever students I may have is, to me, if you really build your characters, if you really, really know your character, you have to internalize your characters. And when you know them, it really is it gives you a real head start, because authenticity is really important to me. And so that was, I mean, I'm sorry, this is, I hope, but I'm not going to say this is brilliant, but I feel like in a way I was able to establish the character of the old lady almost in the first sentence. And it's also a sentence that may turn people off, or it'll make them want to read it. I don't know which way it goes for people. But, and now I'm going to misquote myself, but I think it says, Bet was woken by her bowels. So, and I think it's funny. Some people don't. My husband.
It is.
But the first opening paragraph describes this old lady who's in bed, and she doesn't want. She has to have a night aid because she's in a wheelchair, and she doesn't want to call her night aid because she doesn't feel like having to get out of bed. She's too cozy, and anyway. So she basically, the paragraph ends with her saying, "The bowels will have to wait until morning." So, I feel like in a way, you understand that this woman is strong. You understand she's in a wheelchair. She's old. There's trying to figure out how to deliver information about people that's not expositional, that kind of gives you a picture of them. Is it took me a long time to be able to go into that way of writing, and I had to keep working at it. I mean, I'm working on a second novel, and I'm having an easier time because now I know what you have to do. You have to be able to see these people. You have to picture it. You got to know what they're doing. Dialogue isn't just in a novel. It's not just he said, she said, he said, she said. It's more like she said this, and then the phone rang, and she picked up the phone, and then she did this, and it has all these other things interspersed with it. So you actually can, it's like three-dimensional, should we say? And it's one of the people in my group happens to have in a prior life written for catalogs or something for a mattress company. I don't know if I have it right, but boy, does she know how to take you there. Very, very specific, and and she was, when I listened, she was very helpful just in listening to how she writes and how she's able to really show you everything. Now, I didn't get to that level of it, and it's our styles are very different, but you asked, I'm sorry, I'm giving you a very long-winded answer to your question, but it's definitely, it was a huge hurdle, but another hurdle was also figuring out how to integrate all these people's stories, because I didn't start out with the sense of who all these characters were and who I mean, I had to figure my way into all the characters. I mean, one of the people in my group had suggested that maybe they all live in the same building. Well, they don't all live in the same building, but most of them do. It's only 7 characters. This, she doesn't have a lot of people left in her life. I mean, most people have died off. So everybody it's much more cohesive in terms of everybody being related. And it all takes place in the course of a day. They're all intricately related with one another in one way or in another. And then there's a couple of other characters who are sub characters, but like the great-granddaughter, her great-granddaughter has a boyfriend. Their story is part of it. Her daughter has a husband. His story is an integral part of it. The housekeeper, she has a housekeeper and a night aide, and the night aide had left. Comes from Croatia. She had left her family there. She had left a boyfriend practically at the altar. I don't want to say too much about it in case anybody wants to read it, but that's part of the story too. The housekeeper has a daughter, a 16-year-old daughter, and an ex-husband, and there's a lot of, the daughter winds up hospitalized that day for a cat bite, and there's a lot of stories that go on within the story. So it's not just so figuring out how to integrate them and how the chapters, where they fit in. Another person who's in my writing group, she had given me this chart, and it was a killer, because you had to go through each character and figure out how many words was in their chapters, how many chapters there were, whose came when. It was like, a structural organization of your book, and looking to see if there was somehow balanced. Did some people get shortchanged? Did some people have too many chapters? And when I say it was a killer, I mean, it's grunt work. It's like, oh my God, all right, I read this, I have to put in how many pages for this chapter. What's the synopsis of this chapter? How does it, how does it tie into something else? I mean, that type of thing I hate doing, to be honest with you. I'm kind of an instinctive and organic writer. So being that precise about it, but it was very helpful. But I tend to kind of, I weave my way into things. And so that when I had gotten to a point where I had it all out, I had to then look at it almost like a mathematical equation.
Yeah, I mean, your description of the chart gave me immediately that image of, categorizing and each character has thing. But as you said, it sounds very helpful, because if you have 7 POVs and some of them are not appearing at all or appearing less and some are appearing more, then the chart sort of visually helps balance that out, perhaps.
Well, it's really fun.
But it sounds very tough.
Well, I have to say, the character who I really enjoyed writing the most was a very unpleasant person. And there's nothing like writing. I once had a writing prompt in this writing group I was part of, the short story thing. And it was writing about an unpleasant person. And, we all want to be liked and we want our characters to be liked. And it gave me the license to write about somebody really unpleasant. And it was fun. And so this woman, she's the neighbor. She's the next door neighbor, and she's pathetic. My husband keeps saying, but she's so sad. Well, I mean, she is sad and pathetic. And my second book is really about her, and it's going to help you understand better who she is, and she'll understand better who she is if she reads the book. I don't think that's physically possible, but you never know. But writing about her, so I realized her chapters were longer and fuller and too many chapters, because I just would have fun with her. Her just writing about how she could be so awful. And then actually one of the things that the developmental editor had, I had her soften a little by the end, but she had me humanizing her a little before the end, which I did. But so that in that sense, there was an imbalance that I had to work on and correct. I mean, I cannot tell you that everybody gets totally equal time. I mean, that's unrealistic. You can't write that formula.
Yes, absolutely.
No, I mean, there's a couple of characters who maybe they could have used more, but they were not as integral to the story. So for that reason, I didn't. If I were to go back to it, I won't go back to it. I can hardly read it, but it gets, you get really tired of it. But anyway, I don't know what else I can say about it, except that that keeping that balance, figuring out what that balance is, and then not seeing it totally in in terms of word count and page count, is then frees you to kind of do what fits the story best.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Parmitha.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Steve. Mine is going to be a long rant. Go ahead, please.
Looking forward to that.
No, it's going to be like reminiscing about lovely characters that what you said reminded me of. Bookish characters.
No, I was just curious if writing an awful character was cathartic in a way for you. Was it a form of catharsis? Was it easy to like therapy?
Well, as you get older, you get nastier, or you can. At least my mother did. My mother was good at it, and I fear I may be heading there. But no, I mean, I hate to characterize this way, but I'm basically nice. It's very hard for me to get really angry. And it's so, I mean, I'm, she's somewhat racist. I mean, I'm not, I like people as people. I never think of people in terms of their ethnicity or their gender or any of that. So it wasn't, maybe it was cathartic now that you're saying that, because I'm not nasty in real life unless somebody really pushes me hard. It takes me a lot to get there. So, but it's just, you want to make people, I mean, everybody has to be different, and everybody has, I mean, this is one of the things that was told me. I mean, thank God I had my group, or I wouldn't have written this particular book. But you have to have flawed characters. So everybody has to be flawed in some way. And, I had to work on that too, because I think maybe I didn't do that enough initially, and I had to do it more. But in any event, maybe you can ask my children or my husband if I'm a nasty old lady.
Jennifer, even in this limited conversation, we can already tell you're too nice.
Well, you're sweet. Thank you. Well,
I mean, that is not difficult to gauge at all.
no. Well, well, you know what? I tell you what I am that may put some people off, and that's I'm a truth teller. You know, I say it like it is.
But that's the best. That's the
Well,
best.
it can scare.
The best kind of human being. For me personally.
Well, it can intimidate people at times, and I try to be diplomatic. I try to couch it. For example, if I teach, or I've been on a couple of boards where everybody is got so nice, it's like they're terminally nice, and I and I sometimes find it bullshit, and I will call it, and you know, so I cannot. I have to cut through that stuff. It's just I have a really hard time with that. So to that extent, I'm not always nice. Anyway, now you know. Now you know the truth. Watch out. Watch
out. I was going to say one thing that Jennifer mentioned in her book. It reminded me of these two books, which are very popular and very beloved, by Frederick Backman. One is called My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You After She Was Dead. So that is, and there's a character there. So the grandmother has passed away. I don't think this is a spoiler. It's in the title. And there's a character there called Brit Murray, who is an elderly lady. And she's a bit of a difficult personality.
Well, he wrote another book too. I really loved his writing, and I think he had multiple point of views too. I mean, he's very crotchety. You know, some people may not like his characters, but I like his. The more recent something I read recently, I didn't like as much. But when I read, I can't think of the title. It's an ode to. Is it an ode to something? They made a movie out of it with Tom Hanks.
A Man Called Ove. A Man Called Ove. That was lovely. That was just. I love that book too. I love that and Anxious People the most. But then this one was also
Anxious
nice.
People I tried reading and I didn't get through it. I don't know. It just felt like it got very repetitive to me. But and it was very stylistic. But I think he's a wonderful writer, and that's the kind of writing I like. You know, it's kind of dry. I'm not a sentimental writer. I'm not. I don't think. You know, and I. You know, I'm not. I don't feel like everything has to be wrapped up. I don't. I mean, I don't like Hallmarky endings. So I put it that way. But I like to lead to the ending, and you know, if it's a little open-ended, I mean, in fact, one could argue my book is a little open-ended, and that's okay with me. Let people think about it. Let them make their own decision.
Yes. One thing which I think we've talked about a bit on the forum is that each book and each reading experience is sort of an invitation to collaborate between the author and the reader. And so if there's this possibility of imagining our own ending, I think it can only enhance this unique collaboration and this connection with the author for each reader.
That's a wonderful thing to say. And, you know, it's interesting because I think, and I don't know where I was listening to it, but in theater, theater is really the medium, the best medium for this, where there is a really interactive communication in a way between the audience and the performers, and it alters their performances probably, because they're getting immediate reaction to what they do, whereas if you're in movies and in book writing, unless you're at events and stuff like that, you don't. While it's an intimate relationship between the reader and the writer, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, you know, but it's not shared. You never know what people feel or what people think. So the only way you'll know is through reviews or through people talking about it. And so it's a different type of collaboration. But and when you said, that you in the beginning you kind of identified it with it. One of the people I had read on my Instagram account had talked about how she's read this book at the exact right time in her life. She had an elderly person, I don't remember the relative, who they were putting into some kind of they had to make decisions about caregiving and stuff, and it was a big part of their lives, and she felt like she could identify with it, and it was somehow just knowing that other people are dealing with elderly parents, things like it's there's a way in which Beth doesn't need that much caretaking. She has to have people there because she's physically helpless, but that's the only way. She is by no means a helpless person. And
I love this. Do you know who it reminds me of, Jennifer? Miss Marple.
Totally. And I have to say, while this was not autobiographical in any sense of the word, I don't think anybody can write a book that isn't, in a sense, autobiographical, because you're the writer. You're writing it from your experience, your knowledge of people. And my mother was, I tell you, a strong old lady. And at the end of her life, my father lived to 95, my mother 94. So I was very lucky to have my parents. And I was my sister. I have two sisters, and neither one of them lives in New York where I live. So I was the one who was in most contact with them at the end of their lives. Although my sisters helped me, and they came back and forth. But my mother was in a wheelchair for a number of years. She didn't have to be. I mean, she had a couple of falls, and she became scared of walking. Mm-hmm. And if you don't walk enough, your muscles atrophy. So even when she went, she couldn't anymore. Yeah. But she lived until the last couple of months of her life, when she fell out of her bed and she couldn't get up, and she knew she had to have an aid, which I think is what killed her. She lived totally independently. My father had died a couple of years earlier, and even when he was alive, she was so independent. I don't know why I'm talking about this, but she was able to. She had a big kitchen with a huge table in the middle of it, and she learned how to cook on the edge of her stove. I mean, my mother could do everything. In fact, one time, now you're getting more stories than you bargained for, but one time I called my mother up, and she sounded all garbled. I said, "Mother, why are you talking like that?" She said, well, she found a dentist in the Yellow Pages who came to her apartment, and in her dining room, in her wheelchair, he pulled out 7 teeth.
Whoa.
And she was alone. She didn't even tell anybody.
Oh my God, I would have been so scared to hear that. I would have been like,
no, she was so strong. She was so strong and so independent.
My grandmother was like this. Jennifer, like my mom was the primary caregiver in the final years of her life, and my grandmother, she would just be like, yes, I boarded a bus and I just went somewhere, and my mom would be like, how are you doing this? And I would be like, how is she doing this?
My mother, when she was young, she had an extraordinary career. She was, first of all, she was, educated at a time where not many women were, and she went to Smith, and then she joined a program at Macy's department store where she rose very quickly. And by the time she was like 24, she was head of their book department, which was the biggest book department in the world.
Wow.
And she had a fantastic career. But before we put her in the book department, they had put her as head of Notions, and she hated it, selling buttons and stuff. But what she did was she created an inventory for them, and it was like the first inventory system they'd had, if you can believe such a thing. This is in the 1920s. So she created their first inventory system. My mother cataloged her whole life down to they had like 5,000 books in their apartment, maybe more. And my mother could pick up a book and tell you, if you asked my mother, where's a Farewell to Arms or something, she would tell it's on this room, and this bookshelf, on this row. She had this extraordinary ability to recall everything. So she was, her eyesight had failed, and she had a botched cataract surgery, and I had to become her. I had to be the I can't think of the word. I had to take over signing for her, the attorney, whatever the word is. Like, it's just I've lost it. So I would be opening her mail, and I discovered she had money in her bank account that should have been in some way making money. It was just sitting there. So I transferred her money to a CD. And then I thought, oh my God, my mother's going to find this out. She's going to take her damn magnifier. My mother wore a magnifying glass around her neck, and she would do anything, even though she could hardly see, she would do it. And she went through every bill for her she knew where everything was. So I thought, she's going to see this, and she's going to really feel like I've taken away her power. And so I told her what I had done, and she was annoyed. And so I took the CD, I took it out, I paid the penalty, and I put her back in her bank account. I mean, she was on top of everything. Anyway, that was my mother. So
what a lovely lady. How much of all this has come into this book subconsciously or
I think
consciously?
Bet, it's not her life story in any way, but a lot of it's her character to some extent is based on my mother. I think that would be the closest of anybody in the book who's actually based on an actual person. But look, I'm in my 80s. I've got 5 children. I have 15 grandchildren. I've been a therapist. I've had a lot of life experience of people at all different ages. I've got all these kids in my life, and I'm blessed. I'm very blessed, and I'm very happy for it. But I know, I know pretty much about people at different ages. Mm-hmm. And I think I was probably born with a certain ability to do that. I just think it's part of who I am. I'm a people person. And so I feel like I was able to write with authenticity about characters who, like, for example, in this book, my husband's Iranian. And believe it or not, we're still married with very different backgrounds because he was raised there. And I married when I was barely 20. But I know that culture. And in it, we have a young mm-hmm. Iranian man in this book, and I feel like I'm not a man, and I'm not Iranian, but I felt like I knew enough about him to be able to portray it with enough authenticity. And so with all the characters, there's a reason why there's a young Croatian girl. Now, my daughter's former husband, who's unfortunately passed away, Jerry was from Croatia, and I knew something about his culture. So whatever culture it was that was different from mine, I was very sensitive to the issue of appropriation, mm-hmm. because it's, first of all, oh my God, there was such a stink about it for a period of time where there was a woman who wrote a book, and I can't remember the name of the book or her name, but she wrote a very widely read book that was, she was an American woman, but it was about the story of a Mexican woman who was escaping kind of a drug cartel anyway. And boy, was she given it for that book, she did a huge amount of research. I mean, it wasn't frivolously written, but that whole issue of appropriation became so hot with writers. And so actually I had a couple of characters in the book. Well, it had too many characters anyhow, and that was feedback I got. And so I took away 2 characters, but both of them were people, while I felt like I could write about them with enough knowledge to be to not be challenged, I was worried about appropriation. So I had to, listen, everybody appropriates unless you only write a book with one character like yourself.
Exactly. I was just about to say this. I mean unless I write exactly about myself,
if you write
every experience is different.
A different gender or, a different ethnicity. I mean, but it's tricky to write about different ethnicities. I mean, that's when you can really be challenged. So I tried to be sensitive to that issue and careful about it, and kind of run it past people who were of that ethnicity to make sure. Oh my God, my son's calling me. I gotta let him know. Not now. Sorry. So I mean, it's a lot of, there's experiences in the book that are based on experiences I had, and not that to that extent. It's like, for example, the husband of the old lady, and he's dead, but something had once happened to him, and he wound up in the hospital. And I wrote that chapter mostly from the experience I had with my father, where he had an awful fall and had a horrible, horrible time in the ER with him and with one of my sons, the son who just called me. And in fact, when he read that chapter and he says, "Mom, God," I mean, it's like he didn't want to revisit that because it was hard. It was tough. But my father lived. It was just, we thought he died twice, so it was horrible. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of other things in the book that were based pretty much on, I'm blanking thinking of what they are, but there are other things that actually did happen. It wasn't with me, and it wasn't, it was only autobiographical in the sense that it wasn't writing about myself and this thing happened. It was using whatever happened to me somehow in the point of view of the story that was being told by someone.
Mm-hmm. One thing I was thinking about is, I was just reading about this today morning, believe it or not. So Jose Saramago, who was a Portuguese writer who won the Nobel Prize in Literature, he started writing properly after the age of 50. And so his writing career, I mean, this is what the article said. They were like, his writing career really took off at the time when a lot of people are contemplating retirement. I don't agree with that, because a lot of writers, they write until whenever. Artists, they create until the end. But I wanted to ask, did you always want to write and not have the opportunity, or was it real?
Well, it's not like you're an athlete where your career is, got a real limit on it. It's not, as long as you're alive, theoretically you can write. Theoretically. In terms of myself, it's just, I come from a family, we were all readers and writers in different ways. It's really after my parents died, I had already known it about my mother. I didn't know about my father, and my mother had left. Oh my God, they left everything that they ever did in their lives in their apartment. But so I kept everything just to kind of go through it. And they had both tried to write a novel that would be so successful it would free my father. They both wanted to have kind of a more artistic, kind of bohemian life than they had to have in the suburbs with 3 daughters. They wanted to educate well. And they thought it would, if they could have that kind of monetary success. My father was a patent attorney, and he had to keep doing it. So, until the end of his life, because in order to enable us to have the educations that we had, they were not successful. But writing is just kind of in my DNA. That's what I say. It's like we all. I've written, when I was a therapist, or particularly when I was a divorce mediator, I wrote some articles for professional journals. When I was a family therapist, I wrote an article, not an article, a chapter in a family therapy handbook. But, this is a different type of writing. When I was in my 20s and I hadn't finished college, I dropped out and I didn't finish until I had my 5th child in my 30s. But I had written for a local magazine and just a couple of articles, and then I found it so frustrating with young kids because you sit down to write, and then it was time to pick somebody up at nursery school, or it just became. My theory. I decided, okay, either I get rid of my writing or my kids, and it was a toss up, but I chose the family, and and. And then I wrote plays. I mean, I've written plays over the years. I've written screenplays. I had a screenplay that was almost optioned. I mean, many years ago, and then I just foolishly didn't like the deal and didn't. I don't know. It just didn't happen. So I've always been writing in different forms. I've done screenplays. I mean, basically, honestly, writing dialogue is easier for me because I just feel like I have a better. It's just easier because I think I write pretty good dialogue. But in terms of writing as you get older, well, I never. I mean, my life's busy. I have I have my kids. I have my grandchildren. It was very important. Everybody lives around where we live, except for a couple of my grandchildren who are away at this time. But I'm to be important and for they're all really important in my life. So I've always made a point of having contact with them and being in touch with them. They don't dominate my life, but they're a very, very big part of my life emotionally. And I went from different careers. I also, I'm married. I have a husband. I have a social life. And I've had different careers with different demands. And so the whole issue of figuring out if I wanted to write it, I mean, it was just something I wanted. It actually came writing this novel or just writing like screenplays even came more out of my frustration when I was a therapist. No, excuse me, a theater producer, because I jumped into theater producing because I just have always had this kind of love affair with entertainment business, and it didn't turn out to be exactly the stars went out of my eyes fairly quickly because it's a very tough business. It's almost impossible to make money, and there were a lot of ways in which it was not a good mix with my life. But I stuck with it because I'd walked away from a profession, and the doors aren't open necessarily for you to return. So I figured, okay, I made this. I'm not going to look back. I'm not a big looker backer. I believe you make your decisions, you move forward, and then if you want to do something else, you move on with that. So I stuck with it for many years. But theater, from the time I got into it, which was in the 80s, until now, is very different. For a lot of reasons. I mean, part of it was 9/11, but for whatever it became, let me try to put it in its simplest form. As it became harder and harder to finance plays because of things like 9/11, where people didn't come to New York anymore, and or you couldn't, or they didn't plan in advance. I mean, before then, people would, they'd plan their visits. It would be, that they could have. The theaters didn't have, they would have healthy advances and they would know when people were coming. The economics of theaters changed, making it necessary to bring in more and more producers. And I don't know if you know about the New York theater scene, but if you look at a playbill of a show, you'll see, sometimes you can see over 30 producers. And some of it may be a unit, which comprised of 3 people. It is so many people involved. And so I have been a lead producer, which means I got the property and I was more involved, much higher level of involvement. You're a voting member. In the other ones, when you're a co-producer, you may have a voice, but not a vote. So I've done a couple off Broadway that way, but in terms of Broadway, I didn't have that kind of a clout, but I was very, very involved initially, but as I became less and less involved, I became less and less enchanted. And I became, it's not enchanted, but I have a creative need in me. I mean, I really do. And I needed a way to.
I sense that so strongly, even as we are
Thank you.
speaking.
Well, I started writing. I started moonlighting. I wrote a couple of screenplays. I wrote the book of a couple of musicals, which was an experience. I have a website. All of this is on my website, and some of them, in fact, one of them can be streamed for free. It's called Cockroaches in Cologne. It's on YouTube. But I've done. But
it's a great title.
That's why it's done so well. It has a great cover. It has a great poster, and it has a good title. Titles are everything.
Yeah.
So I've, but I got more and more involved writing. And then ultimately I joined this little writing group I talked about before, when I took for creative writing. And it was just it was like an organic process towards doing something. They're coving up that chance. But there is a problem as you get older. Well, first of all, I'm very lucky that I'm healthy. I mean, nobody can guarantee that one for you. And I just have really good genes. I mean, my parents, I told you that they lived older, and they really, both my mother and my father, they died because they stopped breathing. They didn't have anything really horrible wrong with them. And they did everything wrong in terms of eating and drinking. But I mean, I feel like I should start drinking if I want to live as long as they live. But what happened? But what can, so that's something that that's just something I'm lucky to have. So your health is, because if you have a really big health issue, you just don't want to do it. I also am, in my DNA, I have a lot of energy, and I have to thank my mother directly for that. One of my sisters is like that too. I mean, it's just there. And it's also partly my life, because I was 27 with 4 children. I mean, I've been going at a certain rate all my life, and it's to slow down. I don't know what to do when I slow down. I'm just not good at it. So if I'm sitting around, I'll be knitting, or I'll be reading, or I'll always be doing something. But the way in which it can really handicap you as you get older is your memory. I mean, I remember talking about something in this podcast where I couldn't remember power of attorney. Now it came to me. There are things you can't remember. There are words you can't remember. There are things sometimes you have to go to thesaurus, and so that can be very frustrating. So that you can't articulate things as well as you might want to, and that can be a problem. And then there's another problem. Now I'm telling you the problems of writing when you get old. But the problem is your voice. I mean, if I only wrote in the voice of somebody my age, I don't think anybody would read it. And I don't think that and it's something that worries me about my own writing voice, is to whether I write in a way that younger people can relate to what I write. And I think about this in screenwriting too. Am I writing like I'm an old lady and, talking about, well, I talked about Bet's bowels, but, but my point is that, but you have to be, in order to have a marketability, you've got to reach a wider audience. And I'm concerned about that. I'll ask younger people, I'm like one of my granddaughters who's about 30. I'll say, can you read this? Can you read this and relate to it? Do you feel like this old lady is writing? So that's one other concern. And it's, so all I can do is do my best and test it with people, and not give a damn. I write because I want to write, but more than that, I want to write things that interest people. And I have to, if I lose that perspective of thinking about, well, fortunately, I have a lot of younger people in my life. I mean, I have a few students, and they're all like in their 50s, and great. I feel like they're peer. I don't know what they think of me, but I really like being around younger people. And so I, I don't mean to discount being with people my own age. Obviously, I'm with them too. And I mean, with my grandkids, and, we have the things they say to me, my God, if my grandmother heard them, she'd probably roll over somewhere. I mean, there's some of the language. I mean, I don't get offended by it anymore because I'm so used to it. But I just don't. I think I'm probably not typical, and that those things don't bother me at all. I want to have a relationship with them, and if I have to hear a few fucks, excuse me, it's not going to kill me.
Yeah. Was that something that you struggled with?
Can I say that on this pod? I say something?
You're fine. You're fine.
Nobody cares. All right. Well, so I can talk that way too.
No, I was just curious. You'd mentioned about, creating what you want to create and writing what you want to write, but also finding an audience. Was that hard to balance when you really got into your edits?
I didn't think about it.
Oh,
I didn't
okay.
think about it. But then I didn't take it. I never thought it was going to be real until it became real. But I do. It's something I ask people about.
Mm-hmm.
It's something I can't fix. You know, it's either I have the ability to do it or I don't. And if I don't, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
But I think because I am enough with younger people, and I do things like people think I'm nuts, but like I'll watch the Grammys just to see what people are listening to, what these kids are seeing. I go to the movie version of Taylor Swift. I try to know what's part of this is just wanting to know the lives of my grandchildren and what they
Mm-hmm.
are. I mean, my grandchildren they range in age from 33 to 5. And so, it's all different ages, but in order for them to want to be with me, other than just, a polite having to go see grandma every once in a while, I want to do things with them and be part of their world.
Mm-hmm.
My husband thinks that I work too hard at trying. I don't try to be cool, but I love to do things with them and try to have fun with them. So I do that. And I think that I have a pretty strong relationship with most of them, that it would be nice if it's all of them. I hope so. But it takes being willing to not be locked in the past and, in my day, this is and that was so much. Well, one of my grandsons, whenever I talk about my childhood, he'll start rolling his eyes and boring, they let me know. The good old days. Okay. All right. I've heard enough about that. But, it's if you want to be relevant, you've got to be able to not think that my mother actually said it best. She always used to say, I'm not saying that things are better. I'm not saying if they're worse. They're just different. Times have changed. And even if we may think we had it better, it's just different. And if you can't roll with the times, then you're just going to have trouble having any relevancy with younger people.
I don't know whether I'm young. Probably not. I'm in my early 30s.
Oh, you're young.
I'm young, yes. So I was going to say I read the sample chapter, which is available on your website. So I'm going to get the book next. And the first thing that struck me was really strong authorial voice. I mean, the author has personality. That's. So I wanted to read the book immediately. And for me, I think for a lot of readers, like the age of the author really doesn't matter if the authorial voice is so strong. It's immaterial. So I really think that, of course, for you, there's an emotional imperative as well to stay connected with your grandchildren. But I don't know how to say this. There's a fictional character in a Bengali novel, Bengali is my mother tongue, who says, Moner dorja janla sob shomoy khola rakhbe, which means that keep the doors and windows of your mind always open and let sunlight come in. And I believe that is who you are. And that shows in your every aspect of your creative work.
Actually, what is the name now? Here she's hearing my memory. What is the name of the Indian writer who, oh God, just wrote a book? It's a very long book, and it's many different. Oh,
Tombs of Sand.
Is it Tombs of Sand?
She won the International Booker in 2022.
Oh God.
Covenant of Water.
The cover.
Abraham
Oh my
Verghese.
God, what a writer! I don't even know if he's Indian. I loved a book. He's written wonderful books, and he had many different characters of different ages. I would say, this sounds awful. I hope none of the people I would be hurting are listening. But sometimes when I hear people writing things, or if either it's a book thing or something, and I hear that I can hear older voices sometimes. It just isn't that interesting. So I like what you said, that the voice of the voice of the writer, if it's a strong voice, it doesn't matter. But I think I do think that it can be an issue as you get older. I really do. But anyhow, I like you've been very, very nice, and I'm very happy hearing those things. I hope, was that the opening chapter you read? I forgot what it was. I have to laugh. I'm sorry. I don't know how long we can keep talking, but it's really funny. My husband figured that anybody who read the first line of the book about Bet's bowels would not want to read the book. So he urged me to put the second chapter in the place where I had to put a sample chapter rather than the first chapter. So that's why you're getting the second chapter.
I'm in on both.
Yeah.
Either way,
first
I'm
line
in.
is a great line. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's honest, and as you said, it immediately with the first paragraph which you outlined for us, it gives us a sense of who the character is. And let me admit freely, from Ursula K. Le Guin to Agatha Christie's Miss Marple to more contemporary authors, I have a very soft spot for sassy ladies. Very, very soft.
Have you ever read?
They
Do you
are
read
fun.
Barbara Kingsolver?
I have, but I've only read her recent book, which is the one she won.
That's a tough book. That's a hard
Pulitzer
book
for.
to get into. But some of her, she's
Given
written some
Copperhead.
wonderful, wonderful books. The Poison Word Bible, Pigs in Heaven.
I keep meaning to read that. I'm going to prioritize
It's
that
very
now.
good.
Then.
It takes a little getting into, but it's really good. And so, like Pigs in Heaven and The Bean Trees, to me, those books should be combined into a movie. And I don't have time in my life to do it. But people keep saying to me, "When are you going to make this a movie?" And I keep saying, "Oh my God, I don't know." Whether it'll get on my bucket list or not, I don't know. But I don't, and it would be hard to adapt this to a movie, I think. So, but I don't know. People have asked me so many times. I haven't totally discounted it.
I mean, Jennifer, you can't. I mean, you published a novel and now you're working on another one. Never knows.
I have very little time to write because I have to market this book. It's just unbelievable. Nobody tells you when you write a book, you have to then spend the next 6 to 8 months marketing it. I mean, it's like last year was an unbelievable year in my life. I mean, it takes a lot to get me overwhelmed, but I got my book published. I got it finished. I got it published. I learned how to market it. I'm still learning. I filmed a movie that I'd been working on for a long time. So when I went into pre-production, post-production, I was out in Minnesota for a few weeks when we were filming the movie. Then trying to figure out what to do with the movie. That's been a huge job. I'm also on 3 boards. I mean, my life this last year was just, I mean, I have these projects like the film that I did. I've been working on it since I optioned the book to do it. It was a 10-year road. And does that have to intervene at the same year, at the same time the book gets happening? I mean, this has happened a couple of times in my life because of being in entertainment business, you have projects that are like, balls up in the air. You never know what's going to land when you're going to get the financing, where you're going to put the people together. I mean, you just don't know. So a lot of stuff is on spec. So this is not the first time it's happened to me. That a couple of things that I'm doing that are by themselves full time happened at the exact same time. So last year was crazy making. And to be honest with you, this is March. I'm still, I don't have a day where it's just not constantly filled with things that I have to do. So that the thing that goes on the back burner is my novel. And it's frustrating to me. I mean, I'm really, and it's I'm not going to be doing it if I have only an hour, because the minute I get into it, I got to leave it. And I don't like to work that way. I like to have, I could sit at the computer for 12 hours and write, which is, my husband kills me for that because it's not very healthy. But I don't really know when I've had my limit. So I can just keep going. But I haven't got that type of time right now. It's just too broken up. Anyway, I don't mean to complain. It's all good. I really mean it. It's exciting. I'm very lucky at my age to have such a full life. It's really great.
Yeah.
So I have no complaints. I'm very happy about it, but it's been intense, and it's, as I say, it takes quite a lot to overwhelm me. I also have 2 cats and 2 dogs.
I'm going to ask a question which I think Steve and I have both been wondering.
Yeah.
How are you doing this? Actually, I wonder this about Steve also, because he manages so many things. I don't know how he does it. But to both of you, how are you doing this?
I'll let Steve answer.
I don't know. Sometimes, Jennifer, you said something earlier about you just can't sit still. You just feel like you should always be doing something. I just don't want to stop doing things. So I always try to plan my day with getting things done, but in a good way, but in a things that I want to do. But I feel like when I'm not doing something, I feel like I'm wasting a day, or I'm not taking advantage of the time I have. I'm just,
I know, I get that. I mean, I totally get that. It's my mother lived that way. I mean, even at her, when she was 94, her vision wasn't very good, but she had to do so many rows of knitting a day. She had to do so much reading a day. She had this. But life to me is an adventure that we have to create. It's not there for us.
Mm-hmm.
We have to make it happen. And I mean, all I can say is if I get tired, then too bad. I mean, I'm tired doing things I like doing.
Yeah.
So, and I have been multitasking since a very young age. And it's partly, I mean, I do think some people have more energy than others. And that to me is it's my DNA.
Mm-hmm.
I really think so. But I this sounds, I don't mean to be sexist about it, but I do think a lot of women are good at multitasking, because when you have, particularly if you have kids, you have to.
Yeah.
Your life demands it. And if you're a working mother, I mean, it's like it's an impossible thing to be there for everybody all the time. I mean, it's a juggling act that never ends, because even now in my life, I have, well, as we know, we had a phone call before we started. My life is very, it's just always compartmentalized and things going on. And so I think I think that it's just certain people have the ability to. One of my kids has it. I mean, he just, well, actually, I shouldn't. I mean, more than one of them has that ability to be just go, go, go. And my grandchildren too. I mean, it's just, you see it and it makes you think a lot of it's just DNA, something you pass down.
Yeah.
And it makes it, the worst, there is a bad downside to it. And that is that it can be hard to be present.
Yeah.
And that's something I have to be better at.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe that people can have a whole hour of their lives where it's to put away your electronics. I mean, I mean, I'm bad. I'm confessing I'm bad. I always connected electronically to something.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not posing it as an ideal life. I think it's good to be more present and to smell the roses too.
Yeah. To slow down sometimes. Yeah. It's tough.
I'm good at it when I'm away.
Yeah. But before we let you go, we have a question we'd like to ask all of our guests, and that is, what was your first job, and what did you learn from that experience?
Well, my first job was when I was a teenager in summer. I had a summer job that I just loved, and I had it for a couple of summers, and it was at a small bookstore in a small town. So it was a very personal type of bookstore where people come in and ask for recommendations. And it was, and I really took to it. I mean, I thought I had this dream of one day owning a bookstore, and it was going to be like the Barnes and Noble became, where you have food, you have coffee, you have soup, you can serve things, you can sit on a couch and read. I mean, that was kind of my vision, book talks and everything. And I learned, and and I learned that I could do it because it was so small. I could run the store without the owner there. And I loved it. It was a sense of achievement. It was and in fact, it affected my life because when I went to college, I was just impatient to get a job. I wanted to work more than I wanted to be a student. And I did drop out because of that. And then I found out the job market wasn't very interested in me with no skills and no education or not having completed college. So anyway, but it influenced me quite a lot. And listen, what's better than being in a bookstore and in that environment?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. Doesn't get much better than that.
So that was it.
Well, the time flew. I didn't realize how much time had passed. But it's great, and we love the long-winded answers. We love the long. That's what we tried to do, is get long answers from our guests.
Well, we're going to see how many of your audience turned off after about 15 minutes.
I don't think any of them will. Yeah, but no, it's great. Not. It's fantastic.
Well, I hope somebody will be interested and look at the book and maybe want to get it. Do I have is my website on your whatever it is you do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll
put
be
it
sure
out there.
Of course, yeah, I'll be sure to add it to
Manocherian.net, my name.net.
Sure, yeah, I'll be sure and add it to the description. And is there any other places that people can connect with you? Well,
I'm on Instagram, Facebook, but I mean, basically, I have a social media person doing all that, and I don't usually connect much. That's another time gobbler.
Yes, it is.
I'm on. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. If you go to any of the book sites, Barnes and Noble, I mean all of them, my book is there. It's not in bookstores, unfortunately. That's just not the way I published it. So it's an Audible book, paperback and copies, and it can be sold on any of the major websites. And not only just major, I mean, even in Walmart, they said they can sell it. So
nice.
It's anywhere. And I don't think, and you can also get a link to it off of the social media or off of my website. And and if anybody is kind enough to read it and actually likes it and wants to give me an Amazon review and some stars, I love stars. On Goodreads too. It just has stayed at the same point for so long. Does everybody do the same thing? I mean, it's so funny. No matter, even if the number of reviews goes up, the stars, it's at 4.3 on Amazon and it doesn't move. I don't know. So I could use some 5-star reviews.
Yes.
Nothing like being blatantly self-promoting.
Yeah.
See, I'm getting good at marketing.
You are, yeah. 4.3 is pretty good.
Pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm happy with it. And I've stopped pretty much reading them because that's another thing that would gobble. I'll never write another book if I start doing all that.
Yes. A lot of time sinks, a lot of time treadmills to get on if you are not careful.
Well, if Paramita reads it and likes it, please contact me if you have my contact information. I want to hear how you like it.
I will. I definitely will. I'll ask Steve and I'll reach out to you. I'm sure I'll find a way to reach out to you.
You can contact me through the website, I think. But
oh, great. That's the perfect way.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming by. Really appreciate your time, and you're welcome back anytime. Just let me know, and we'll make it happen.
Oh, well, do I have to wait to write another book to be on your?
No, of course not. No, we can talk about anything. We just get on and
when my movie comes out. If we get my movie. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.